Hi everyone. So I'm Caroline Paris. I'm the CEO of Nerdio.net, which is a collaboration platform for film and games. And I actually started off as a visual effects artist and nowadays supervision. I did a bit of on-set supervision, visual effects supervision for a couple of studios, freelance basis, mainly of a compositing background. So many years ago, I did a compositing course at Escape Studios back when it was Shake. So that's how old I am. And so a couple of years later.
You're going to say something else then. What are you going to say back when it was? I was like, oh my God, what's he going to say?
So that a couple of years later, Nuke became the industry standard for compositing. And so I started freelancing in the bigger companies, Framestore and MPC. And then went on to do a lot of commercial work, and I've been freelancing mainly in the UK for over a decade. So that's a bit of background about me.
So thanks, Caroline. So ex-escapee, which is always, well, not an ex-escapee, an escapee, which is great. And obviously earned your stripes at some of the biggest companies in the world. And you mentioned Nerdio. I've put it in the chat. We'll come on to Nerdio towards later on in the talk. And it's a platform that Caroline has set up, and it's a really interesting and valuable place. And I would kind of urge you all to check it out at some point. It's a place where you'll be able to find work and projects going forward. We'll come back to that in a minute. So thanks, Caroline. David, would you mind giving us a little intro, please?
Sure. My name's David Todman. I'm probably the polar opposite of Caroline. I didn't study anything to do with graphics formally. I actually have a music degree, which I tried to pursue a career as a session musician, but was always very artistic as well, and started doing nascent sort of pop video graphics world of the mid-1990s with friends of mine who were musicians, and started to get noticed for doing that sort of work, and also just digital art, which I was doing as a hobby at the time, and managed to, I guess, blag my way into companies, initially as a graphic designer. And I was always fascinated with 3D animation. It had been around since I was a kid in a very nascent form, but I was doing it as a hobby on my Macintosh computer, which I was also using for music software at the time. And so I gradually shifted my focus away from music professionally into doing graphics. And I now specialize in 3D computer graphics, or in more recent times, what's become known as 3D motion design. So it's a slightly different field to the visual effects industry. It's a lot more chaotic and not so well structured. And so you need to be able to accept that you don't really know what you're going to get thrown at on any given project. I would fit, if you're in the visual effects language, probably as a generalist, I would be considered. So I tackle everything from the day-to-day work of being an artist through to pipeline development. I do technical development for software, mainly in Cinema 4D. And I also direct and project manage now as well. So I have a very varied life. Also have an interest in live action. So I've done a fair bit of live action directing, including making a couple of my own little films. So I have a very varied career, but one for which I'm completely unqualified.
I love it. Nice one, David. And I think that's quite common, isn't it? Particularly, obviously if you're over 30, let's say, which I assume, I'm not going to, but I know I am.
Very kind, even making that seem an option. But yes, I'm well over 30.
And I think it's really important. It's maybe a bit of a historical lesson for some of the students as well. It's worth remembering that when we were your age, there weren't any visual effects degrees really. I don't think there might have been one somewhere, but I don't think there was actually. And the way you got into the industry was basically knocking on a door and saying, "Can I come and help you to move something for an hour?" And then they would say, "You know what? You're quite useful. Stick around." And that's the way that people kind of bounced around. And planning out a formal career, even now, is quite difficult, even for people of your generation, even with all the support that you've got with visual effects degrees and all of the stuff that we try to put on for you as well, conferences and introductions and blah, blah, blah. And there are more kind of like structured routes as well. So what we're thinking about mainly today is freelancing. Okay. So the first thing I want to do, and this is a bit of a tough question. It's a bit of not a nasty one, but who out of you two would be prepared to give it a go at defining what a freelancer is? And what the difference between a freelancer and someone who has a permanent contract? Because I think let's just set that as a as a ground?
I'm happy to have a go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, the main difference between freelance life and being employed is being employed is a full-time job. Some people see it as much more security. You tend to earn a little bit less when you're employed full-time. And the reason for that being, so when you're a freelancer, you tend to charge more money because there will be times when you are not working. So it's very rare until you become a very established freelancer that you have work coming in all the time. So one of the reasons why you earn more, but you also have the ability to, and this is where you need to have an accountant, and how you set up yourself as a freelancer. It becomes very important if you're setting yourself as a sole trader or as a company, because even if you set yourself up as a company, then when you're starting to, let's say, buy computers and materials and software, this is all stuff that you can deduct through tax. And when you're employed by a company, it's your employers who take the brunt of all the expenses. So, and that's deducted from, and that's why your salary is also lower. I guess that's one part that I could explain.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite interesting because there's a lot of facets to it, isn't there? So first of all, let's say that freelance, it's not a permanent contract. It's normally you're employed for a certain amount of time. That can be a day, it can be a week, it can be a few months. But there are issues about if you work at the same company for a certain amount of time, they then have to offer you, I think, a full-time contract and stuff, don't they? But anyway, we'll come back to these things a little bit. But the other thing to remember, as Caroline pointed out there, has a lot to do with the way you're paid and the tax that you pay. Now, when you're employed, the company pays your tax, PAYE, pay as you earn, okay? When you're self-employed as a freelancer or a sole trader, and maybe we'll come back into it, if you don't know what a sole trader is, we'll come back to that as well. You're responsible for your tax. Now, I want you to remember that now, okay? Because you have to pay it at some point. David, do you want to expand on what Caroline has said a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, from a slightly different angle, taking a step back even from that, the fundamental difference between whether you want to become a freelancer or a full-time permanent contract is a freelancer is a business. So you are taking on all of the responsibilities of being a business when you're a freelancer, which includes your own tax, often includes purchasing your own equipment, finding a way to get yourself to work, managing your time. Whereas when you take on a permanent contract, a lot of those tasks are handed over to the company. So you become part of a business as a full-time employee, whereas as a freelancer, you are a business. And that's a very important distinction to make. It can also seem quite intimidating to people, the idea of all of the additional administrative burdens and responsibilities that you have as a freelancer. If the benefits you get of being a freelancer, which I'm sure we'll go on to talk about, don't outweigh your worries and your fears about your responsibility as a business, that's, that might be a signpost that ultimately being a freelancer is not for you in the long run. Most people begin as freelancers because there's a lot more freelance work out there. There's a lot more unpaid work out there to get experience, which is kind of a vital part of getting started. But in terms of your long-term vision for how you see yourself working going forward, I would say, yeah, that the clearest distinction I could make is that you are going to be running a business, which is you as a freelancer, and you are also going to need to market and sell yourself. And when you take on a permanent role, you don't have to do that anymore. Work is going to come your way via somebody else without all of that extra effort.
Right, good stuff. Right, let's just pause for a second. And so let's just think there so at the moment, I'm thinking, why do I want to be a freelancer? You get paid less money, or do you? That's another question. We'll come back to that as well. And I've got to take care of all my tax, and I've got to find my own work. Why would I want to be a freelancer? What are some of the benefits, I wonder?
I guess that time management, I think, for me, is one of the best things about being a freelancer. Also, I do love cameras. I do love computers, and being able to buy those and deduct them from as an expense from a company is something that I value. But time management, really, to be able, once you become a little bit more established and you have a list of secure clients, you feel secure because you have quite a bit of work coming in steadily. It's a question of just being able to manage your time and to be in charge of that, to be able to take holidays when I want, to be able when you're employed by somebody else, it's not like that. So, you need to be very organized with your schedule. I mean, somebody's going to schedule your work for you. You don't really have a say in it when you're employed by other people. And in terms of holidays, you need to ask permission for that, which is very different when you own your own company or you work as a freelancer.
Okay, let me stop you there for 1 second and take this. So that's some really good stuff there. So, all right, you're kind of winning me back over a bit now. I'm thinking, okay, I can choose when I want to work, in theory, maybe. Once I've established some clients, and I can choose my holiday times, but I guess you don't get paid for being on holiday if you're a freelancer.
No, but that's why you charge more.
And that's why you charge more, right? So when you're employed, you get benefits of getting a regular salary. You know what you're going to get, and you get paid holidays, and someone pays your tax for you. That's cool. But on the other side of that coin, as a freelancer, you charge more money. I guess you can work more and make more money, and you can just cut loose whenever you want to. So, okay, can I just ask you, Caroline, when you say clients, right, what do you mean by clients?
So let's say I work as a limited company, basically. And yes, there have been projects where I've had maybe 20 artists work for me. But most of the time, I'm just doing work by myself. So I work under a company, but I'm basically a visual effects supervisor or a compositor. And as a compositor, let's say I've worked for 4 very well-known companies like Framestore, MPC, Black Kite, like some smaller companies, Mainframe, let's say. And basically, it's just me working as a compositor using their equipment, but charging through my company.
Okay, so the big VFX companies, which some people may get, or games companies or animation companies, because this applies to all of the different worlds in many respects. But so those companies that some people may get a full-time job at, they also hire freelancers as well, right? Okay.
Very true.
Yeah, good stuff. The ratio has really changed in my career. When I started out initially as a graphic designer and moving into 3D, the general makeup of most companies was sort of 80% full-time, 20% freelance. And there was a lot of question marks over why somebody would even want to freelance, because it was the inference was that they weren't good enough to get a job. So it was a little bit of a kind of a funny profession. Whereas, now it's probably the other way around. If anything, it's kind of 80% freelancers, 20% full time. So there's been a massive shift toward. I'm not sure it's that high in every company, but freelancers in the creative industries make up now the majority of the workforce. So that has become a real shift. And that's, you hope that suits both parties. The reason that that's evolved that way is because obviously as much as you have responsibilities as a freelancer, those are responsibilities the company then doesn't have. So that's quite attractive for them. If they need to get rid of you, most of us work on close to or 0 hours contracts, which means that you can basically be got rid of in a day. And that is a risk of a freelancer, but that suits businesses greatly, because if a project gets dropped or it gets delayed, and there's been a lot of that going on in the last year, they're not hemorrhaging money as much because they can just lay you off you know, hopefully temporarily. But so it provides a lot of flexibility for business, and obviously then it suits the people who want to have a flexible life. So you hope that the two meet, but that it's not hardwired into our business, that this ratio, or the fact that there are freelancers and full-timers. It's a cultural thing, and it has shifted and changed over time. I felt before coronavirus there was a bit of a move back to hiring more full-time people, and I think with this dreaded IR35 rule change, which hopefully we won't get into because it's too boring, but I think that's going to provoke a very big move back away from freelancing, because businesses are scared of this new law and they don't want to be fined large amounts of money for hiring freelancers that were supposedly should be paying tax on a PAYE basis. But
is that, that's if you've been there for a certain, is that if you've been there for a certain amount of time or something, or is it different?
It's more complicated than that. I'm getting IR35 notices from one of my clients because one of the 8 things on a checklist is a worry for them, and so just to save any hassle, they've told everyone that they're IR35. So at the moment it's a bit of a wild west, this, and I'm not sure how worth it is going into this, because I think that this isn't going to last very long. It's going to be an absolute disaster in April for freelancers, and it's going to be a disaster for businesses, and then they're going to have to sort it out. So hopefully in 12 months time the rules will have changed anyways, but it's an earthquake in our industry through some very, very poorly thought out legislation by this government.
Well, who would have thought it anyway, I'll avoid that. Okay, so IR35 is a piece of, I imagine the IR stands for Inland Revenue, and it's probably some piece of tax code which you guys should get on top of and understand. So we won't turn this into a tax webinar, as valuable as it is, because but it's definitely something you need to look at. These are the types of things that you need to be on top of: invoicing, taxing, paying your taxes, etc., and understanding the legislation. But
and can I just say that it's not that complicated, and especially if you are a freelancer, you should definitely get an accountant, because in the beginning, especially if you set up as a limited company, you'll pay your accountants for whatever, 80, 100 pounds a month, but they will save you money and they will do all your taxes for you, and it's like less of a headache. And
how do you get an accountant?
Look for one online, or you get somebody to suggest a good one for you.
Yeah. Do you know what? If I was looking for an accountant now, I would ask Caroline who her accountant was, and that's what I would do, or David, and that's how it works.
So really, you want to know that there's one that's good, and you always go with that, because I mean, how would we know what a good accountant looks like compared to a bad one?
Yeah, exactly. I'm putting here, I use 123 Financials, these guys, and I used as well Adroit, Countax, these guys. They cost around 80 pounds plus VAT a month. And I'm working as a limited company.
Okay.
And I'm with a company called Crunch, which I don't think they're unique now, but they were when they started. I started with them about 7 years ago. They're basically your accountant, but they have online software, which is exactly like the online software for QuickBooks, and that can record all your expenses. Yeah. But because they're piped in to all of that, then I pay a minimal amount of money for the accountancy, because it's all been kind of done by me as I go along. So whenever I get an expense or a receipt, I log into the software, just basic accounting software, and you can say, oh, I've had an expense on this date, this is the amount of money, and then internally it will do all of the tax calculations for you, and then they are my accountant as well, so I have an accountant attached to that, and then they will audit my accounts at the end of the year. They'll remind me about all the other tiny bits of paperwork you have to do, like there are these forms you have to submit if you're a limited company to Companies House that have to be done every year, which is a pain if you're having to remember it yourself. But I have a calendar that sends me reminders, and I just have to press a button and they'll do it for me. So I'm a big fan of automating that stuff as much as possible, because that gives you much, much more time to worry about the things that you really want to be worrying about, which is doing good work.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, this is brilliant. I mean, really good points there. So guys, have a look around and see what those options are. But okay, what I was going to say is some students will enter the workplace and they might want to start as a freelancer, and some people, and they're ready for it. That's what their choice is. They want to go for it. And we can drill down even more in a minute about the different types of places you can work and stuff. But But then some students will, maybe their first choice is to get a permanent job somewhere, but for whatever reason, they don't get one to begin with. And they're kind of almost forced into being freelancers, I suppose. So there's two kind of distinctions there. There's the ones that really want it and the ones that are doing it just because it's a way to start. I mean, have you got any thoughts on that, or how that journey might kind of work out, as it were?
Well, I'd recommend starting your career as a freelancer. I mean, the way that my trajectory into graphics worked was that I really did blag a job as a graphic designer at a large union headquarters in Wimbledon. And I managed not to get fired for 2 months. That was kind of my greatest achievement in my career, probably, like, because I was kind of talented, but I didn't really know what I was doing in a professional sense. And I stayed there for 10 months, and then they offered me a ridiculous amount of money to stay. I mean, like, for a graphic designer today, it would have been an absurd amount of money. But I realized I didn't know that much. You know, I'd fallen into this job. And I mean, obviously you guys that are studying have an advantage in that you've kind of at least studied that field. So you've got a bit more idea than I had of the industry. But I felt like I needed to know more about the business and what I wanted to do with my life. So I actually turned that down, and I signed up with a couple of recruitment agencies, one that's now called Aquin, is still going, which specialized in Macintosh graphic design. And I spent the next 2 years doing quite short jobs, you know, going from one place to another place, incredibly stressful. But it was this condensed education for me. You know, I got to see a bit of the world. And that was when I first encountered 3D animation, because it happened to be part of one of the jobs that I was doing. And it gives you a bit of a view of the world. So even if your long-term goal is to become a full-timer, it's definitely not a waste to go through the process of, you know, freelancing, getting involved in different environments, because that is one thing, a fundamental difference I would say about freelancing and full-time work. The variety of being a freelancer is, you know, can be tremendous, because you're going sometimes into different industries from one week to the next. Whereas inevitably, even if the work coming in is interesting, whatever company you work for full time, it'll have its own niche, you know, in the industry, and you will tend to get less variety of work. And so going forward, once you've decided exactly what it is you want to do in a few years' time, that's exactly what you might decide that you want to do. But if you want to make an informed choice, I'd strongly recommend freelancing, seeing what's out there. It'll blow your mind. There's stuff you will never have thought of that's going on, and that might catch your enthusiasm, and it send you down a different route. But freelancing is never a waste at the beginning of your career. That's what I would say. You know, don't feel it's the best education you'll get.
Absolutely. I was going to make one. I was going to say one thing, and maybe I'll address it to Caroline as well, or did you want to follow on from that straight away?
Well, my experience is completely different, but this is why it's good to have like different views, because when I studied, I did a little bit of freelancing before, like 1 or 2 small jobs in Spain and Portugal before I came to the UK and did my escape course. And it was straight after the escape course, when I passed and they had their escape pods, which were directly linked to MPC, I basically started working for the big companies straight away. So I went from MPC to Framestore, and then paid my dues, went from, you know, paint and roto to compositing. And that's when I went to Invisible when there were like 2 people. And then from there, once they had to, after they'd done a big show, they had to scale down the company. And basically we all got let go. And that's from there I started freelancing. And that's how we went from, I went from working first for the big companies in blockbuster movies to then going into commercials and doing small contracts at Cinesite or wherever, and joined that world.
I'm glad. Okay, that's great. I'm glad that it kind of matched. It feeds into what I was going to ask actually, which is about. Now, I think a lot of our students, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think a lot of them, quite understandably, at the beginning of their careers, want to work on big blockbusters, whether it's films, animation films, or games, AAA companies, etc. And I think that people can be a bit blinded by that sometimes. And so, you know, what's your experience of that? I'll go back to you, Caroline, just to follow up on your point, if that's okay. So you started out really with the big boys and stuff, and You know, what do you think of that?
Well, I don't want to crush anybody's dreams. But this is where it comes down to you and your personality. So I had the same dreams as everybody else, to work for the big companies and like work on big blockbuster movies. I think most people that go to Escape have those dreams. And it's great. I mean, Escape already has a reputation that's going to get you into these companies eventually. So, you know, I worked at Framestorm. I have my name on lots of big movies, but especially back in the day where none of the roto prep was outsourced, you literally had to start with roto prep. I did it for 2 years. It was soul destroying. And then, you know, move on to compositing, which is what I really wanted to do. And obviously I've been composing for years, and I got to working in those big companies. It's great for several reasons. You get to work with some of the best artists in the world, some of the most advanced pipelines. You get access to really expensive software. Anything you need, you sort of like click your fingers. You've got render farms that are ridiculous. And that's the one thing when you go freelancing, if you start with the big companies and then you go to the smaller company, like, where's the render farm?
Well, we've got, funny enough, there's a question in the Q&A actually, which is from E. Wilson. He says, how do you manage rendering? Do you use a render farm? If yes, which one? So, yeah.
Well, I'll get onto that. I'll get onto that, definitely. And so basically, you know, when you start, it's really good to have an experience of both the big companies and the smaller companies. But when you start with those big companies and then go to the smaller companies, you realize that smaller companies have not, you know, the infrastructure is completely different. And you need to be much more versatile than when you're at a big company. A big company, you literally do one thing. You're a cog in a machine. So if you're a compositor working on Guardians of the Galaxy, there are, you know, 6, 7, 8 large companies with 150 artists across the world doing this. And it's, you know, you're given 3, 4, let's say 10, 20 shots to do. You're working off a template. It's, even though you're learning and you're becoming better technically, it's quite restrictive. It's not, I found towards the end of it that after doing this for 5 years, 6 years, that I wanted to do more really. And I didn't want to be basically a cog in a machine. I wanted to go out and be in smaller companies where I had a bit more say and I could do a bit more creatively. And especially if you're a generalist, you don't want to work in movies. You want to work in commercials because you get to do a bit of everything. So it's all to do really with what you really want to do. I mean, I wanted, with your career, I definitely wanted to progress to become a visual effects supervisor. I definitely wanted to spend more time on set because I love the balance of being on set and being and doing a bit of technical or creative work in the studio as well. I do prefer, doing commercials nowadays, just because I get to do much more. It's a shorter turnaround. It's not 6 months working on the same sequence. And yeah, that's more my personality.
Can I ask you a quick question? If you could now, I mean, things have worked out well for you. Obviously, you've had a great career. If you had the choice, if I said to you now, you, instead of going and working in the big companies, doing all the kind of the prep work and going straight into a smaller company and getting straight on with more creative stuff, what would you choose? Would you be prepared to take your name off those big IMDb pages and films?
No, not really. I think I like the career progression. I wish it had been faster. I think everybody does. But I learned a lot working for these bigger companies. I did. There were times where I was tired and I didn't think that, you know, there was times where I would get fed up of looking at the same sequence, for example, for 6 months, you know, when you're in one company. I'm definitely made for shorter turnarounds. But just, yeah, working with some of the most amazing artists, looking at the way those pipelines work, it actually gave me so much education. And so when I went to smaller companies, I was like, oh, okay, you guys don't have this, but you you can make this work by doing this. There are certain things that afterwards that you can bring from larger companies into smaller companies, in terms of knowledge, really, that you've learned with some of these bigger companies, and that's quite well received. And the fact that, and this is what I was talking about yesterday, the fact that I had started off with bigger companies and had that in my CV right at the beginning, that opened up a lot more doors when I started freelancing.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you, Caroline. I think what's really interesting about having you two particularly on this as well is that different journeys, obviously, and everyone, well, maybe less so these days. Maybe people are getting more similar journeys in terms of, I went to the university, I went to Escape Studios, I did a degree, and then I started here, and then I did that for a bit. But I think one thing that's really valuable to remember is that there are so many different options and so many different types of place to work. So David, do you want to come in on that a little bit? Maybe give us your opinion on how you've come across things maybe that you thought, wow, I didn't expect this to be a thing. You know?
I mean, I take one thing to add to what Caroline said. I mean, she is totally right on a because I know it'll be a concern to everyone here about how they're going to find work. But it was something that really didn't occur to me till far too late in my career, was how bowled over people can be by you having the right company or the right project on your CV. And films is a particularly good genre for that, because almost everybody watches films. So even if it's outside of the film industry, they think it's terribly amazing that you worked on a particular film that they saw in the cinema, you know. But inside the industry, it's a badge of honor, it's a badge of quality, for better or worse, that, you know, if you can put the frame store or MPC or, you know, double negative, or, you know, and you have that on your CV, you can go anywhere, and it's like having a degree, basically. It's like, you know, oh, they've got a degree, they've been through that, you know, that machine, and they've come out relatively unscathed. And it's exactly the same in all of the other industries, you know, all the other graphics industries. So I mentioned first, I started off as a graphic designer, unqualified, but I had a particular aptitude for that. And I did start off in some of the very big agencies. And it is worth pointing out that because visual effects is kind of the glamorous end of the business when you're starting out, maybe not once you've been in it and had to roto 55 million people out of a shot, but when you start, it's also worth having a picture in your mind of the relative size of industries. As of last year, the graphic design industry, that's graphics that would be for print-based design, web-based advertising, marketing, is between 50 and 60 times bigger than the entire turnover of the film visual effects industry. And you wouldn't think that, because visual effects punches far above its weight in terms of, you know, its media presence. But in terms of the available jobs that there are at the moment, motion design, which is a newly invented industry, really, because it's come from graphic design. It's an adjunct to that. People that only used to do static imagery and came from some sort of static imagery background, either fine art or typography, or, you know, some sort of artistic static form, have now moved more and more into the movement of images. And so it's become known as motion design. That's a huge industry. So there's a lot of work there, and it's not something that people that are going probably through Escape Studios, and even in many other creative educational environments, think about it. It's not widely advertised. It's not been corporatized as much.
We do actually have a motion graphics course, which is a short course, and that kind of addresses that side of things. But I think a lot of obviously, you know, we've got game students, we've got animators, 3D animators mainly, but some 2D as well. And we've got VFX guys, 2D and 3D. And I think that sometimes, you know, for example, work in motion graphics or some of that, the softwares are slightly different. It's mainly kind of like Cinema 4D, isn't it? And After Effects. But the point being is there are transferable skills with all of the different courses that we've got. And there is convergence these days between a lot of the, you know, Unreal is coming into visual effects.
Convergence, it's almost the old kind of divisions between industries are just evaporating, and a lot of that is software driven. For instance, Cinema 4D, that has a reputation of being kind of about motion design, you know, is now becoming vastly adopted in visual effects because it's the best piece of software now. You know, it does everything really well, and it doesn't crash. You know, so people that use Maya are swapping over in droves to Cinema 4D and Houdini as well, which also crashes quite a lot. But then you've got Blender, which is free and is now serious contender in 3D animation. I mean, it's now actually being adopted to some degree by all of the major studios, because why wouldn't they? Because it's free, so it's not even a,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And I think that Blender gets a bit of a bad rap sometimes. I think people think that Blender is what you use when you're 7 years old and you're practicing, and then you step up to the bigger ones. I don't know, Caroline, what's your experience of what David said there about these?
Agree. It's come such a long way, and you know, Cinema 4D. I worked for in the past 3 years. I worked for Territory a lot, and they started off with UI and that sort of thing. They used to do all the screen inserts, and that was a lot of motion graphics, and so they're amazing at Cinema 4D, and the work that comes out of that is just beautiful. Like, and it's come such a long way, and plus we use, you know, Arnold and renderers that you use in Maya as well. So it's the end result is.
And I guess, okay, so let's bring this back around to the whole freelance subject as well. Maybe there's something here about, if you're a freelancer, do you need to have a better understanding of lots of different softwares, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a double-edged sword, because it's something that I'm very aware of at the moment, that there's a sort of exhaustion that comes from that, which is probably too much. Because there's a FOMO effect, for, you know, fear of missing out, when somebody announces a new bit of software that does something better, and you think, oh my god, I've got to learn that now. Renderers has become a bit of a nightmare for us in 3D over the last few years, because whereas, you know, we had, you know, there was V-Ray really, and I mean Arnold's been around, but then you had Mental Ray, and that was, they were sort of attached to the software, so there weren't a lot of options. But now with GPU rendering, you know, you've got Arnold, you've got Octane, you've got Redshift, and, you know, very high-end productions could be using any of those, and it's sort of exhausting trying to stay on top of it. Certainly,
that also really depends if you're a generalist, right? Or if you're a generalist, you're going to have to be on top of everything. And then if you're a 3D artist, you still have to be on top of all the 3D software and whatever. But there's a lot of freelancers that I know that stick to their guns, and they're like, I'm use Maya and Houdini, that's it. And I'm a new cop. I'm a new cop, so there's not much. That's it. That's what I use. And obviously, I need to learn like Nick Studio and that sort of stuff. So I'm sticking to that piece of software just because I want to spend my free time not learning about like every piece of software, but I also have like I do on-set stuff as well. So I've chosen to try to minimize the amount of learning I have to do to just be very good at two pieces of software and, you know, being on set.
I think the 2D guys it's kind of, this is a generalization, but 2D is kind of, it's been a bit, you've been quite lucky in a way that it's all about nuke in many ways, isn't it? And there's not that many challenges, I suppose. But okay, just quickly, I'm conscious of the time. Caroline, let's bring this back around to the whole freelance thing again. Do you want to, okay, so Caroline, do you want to show us some stuff about Nerdio? But also, I just want to invite students to, if anyone's got any questions about anything, there's so many topics to cover here, right? There's everything to do with earning money and getting paid. And I know that you have your professional practice course where you meant to drill down into this stuff as well. If anyone's got any questions, please stick them in the Q&A. There was one from one of the students who said, how do you find clients, especially in the lockdown? So, do you want to answer that, David? Caroline, go ahead.
I was thinking David was a better one to answer that question.
I mean, am I supposed to say you go to Nerdio?
Exactly. Go to nerdio.net.
And then the problems are solved. Well, I would say starting out is a bit different. We were talking about this yesterday. I don't work with agencies anymore. I represent myself. So, and I have a presence which I work at. You know, I have a reel and a website, and I contribute to all sorts of different forums. But that's easy to do when you've got a certain sort of standing in industry. People are paying attention to you already. You can build up networks. People want to get in touch with you. That's great. That's not, I would say, the best way to start out as a freelancer. I would highly recommend signing up. If you want to be a freelancer and you want variety and you don't want to apply to internships at a big studio, because that's another subject, because that's not freelancing. But if you want to get clients, don't do all the hard work yourself to start with. Sign up with some sort of an agency that has work coming through it. It's network science. You're looking for hubs. These are individuals or individual entities through which a lot of information passes. They're always in life, the people you want to attach yourself to. And in trying to get work, those are, you know, what we used to call recruitment agencies. I don't even know what their sort of term is now, but there are agencies that represent both full-time job applications and freelance. They do both, any individual one. And they have their job boards effectively. And so you can sit on one of their job boards on Facebook or on their website, and you can just see work coming in, and you can just apply for work through them. Now, whether you're successful or not is a whole other, you know, issue about whether you have a reel, what your presence is like on the web, you know, what your portfolio is like. And that's always going to be a work in progress. And that's a very difficult issue when you're starting out. It's very chicken and egg, and it can be very frustrating. So I would also say, as well as going through recruitment agencies so that you can go to one place and apply for many jobs, do projects either for yourself or look for other people to collaborate with on projects.
Wow. This is the perfect segue.
It was not an accident. But it's the reason that I've ended up where I am now is entirely, when I look back at it, because of the skills that I acquired through doing work that no one paid me to do. And that takes a lot of pressure off, by the way. It's much easier to mess things up when they're not even paying you anyway. You don't feel so bad. And also the contacts that I've made and the portfolio that it built for me was something that I just couldn't get. If you're proud or your job's worth about it, it's like, well, I'm not working for people unless they're, you know, unless I'm being paid to do it. Your progress in terms of building your quality of your work is going to be glacial. So, and you've got way more energy than I have. You know, I'm old and I'm tired now. You aren't. So do it now.
I am.
Get involved in side projects. If you've got your own passion, do it. Because now I hire people. You know, I put together teams for projects. If there's one thing that impresses me about people starting out, it's when they've done something off their own bat. You know,
what? Everybody says that. All the recruiters always say it all the time. It's so interesting. Side project.
It's what sets you apart from everybody else. If you, you know, everybody finishes their course with the same show reel. It's the people who go outside and look for other projects to get involved to expand their portfolio that make the difference.
Okay, on that note, Caroline, do you want to share your screen and show us some stuff? And Ross, I've seen your question. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to pop it into David's head and to Caroline's head as well, and we can answer that afterwards. But Ross has made a very good point. Don't you get worried about where the next job's going to come from? But let's come back to that. This is why I
said you charge more as a freelancer, because it is worrying. Of course, everybody gets worried, especially in the beginning, you know, when the next client is going to come. And the reason why you're charging more is because you know that sometimes you're going to spend maybe 2-3 weeks without work, and so you need to be sure that you're going to cover yourself financially for that period.
Do you know, one of the things that I've realized that we haven't really covered, which I think it's that idea of, do you charge a day rate or do you charge for the actual piece of work and break it down? And how do you manage that client? And maybe we need to do a part 2 of this actually, because that's a whole other thing of, like, you know, if someone gives you some work to do and you're not employed, what are they expecting you to deliver each day, and your workload, and how do you protect yourself and all of that? How do you make sure that you're not going to get worked into the ground and you've taken on something that's too big for the time that they've given you? So I don't know. Let's come back to that. I want to show everyone Nerdio, if that's okay.
Okay, I'll do that quickly. So guys, I'm going to show you Nerdio.net. So I started Nerdio many years ago, like 6 or 7 years ago, as a side project, because I was joining when I was working at Framestore and MPC. I saw that everybody had their own personal project, and these were all like low budget indie projects that were done by a bunch of artists that were senior artists or mid-level artists that were working at these bigger companies. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if there was a platform where they could post those projects and, you know, people from all over the world could collaborate, and it would be like an internship, and people could, you know, work on these high quality projects and expand their portfolios. So it took a while. It started off as a Facebook group, and then we raised some money and we started developing the platform. Nowadays, here it is. This is the actual website that you can see here, and then you have all the projects. So these ones with header images and videos, these are collaboration projects. So they're free projects that anyone can collaborate on. And you can see they posted a video, they posted a trailer of it. You can follow the project, and they have a little like details of the project, and then they list the people that they're looking for. So
I'm not sure. Are you updating your screen, Caroline? Because I'm not sure if it's.
Am I sharing the wrong screen?
Possibly. At the moment, we've just got the
wrong one then.
We've got the Nerdio interface, but I wasn't sure if you were clicking through a little bit as well.
I've shared the wrong screen then.
It might be share whole screen or desktop rather than share if it's a new tab that opened. It sometimes.
There we go. Here we go. All right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Great.
Here we go. So collaborations. So this is the website, and you can view all projects from here. And I was just saying, so paid projects. This is our recruitment side. Collaborations is the free for all. So people post their projects, their personal projects or indie projects, don't really have a budget. And let me see, as you can see here, for example, Mobius, they can post a trailer, Vimeo, YouTube, and then they list the tasks that need doing and who they're looking for. And you can see which ones have been filled, which ones haven't, Nuke Fusion, compositors, and these are the people who are have been chosen to work on the project. And this is on a collaboration only basis. And this is where mainly it's just about getting new portfolio material, getting experience, and meeting new people who will eventually probably get paid projects in here.
Yeah, that thing of just meeting new people in itself. I mean, you could get onto one of these collaborations and that's it. You just follow your nose from there, don't you? I remember the first job I had as a runner, I kept the call sheet at the end of it. And for me, that's how I started, from that one call sheet, if you know what I mean, and carried through. So this is just such a high-tech version of, do you remember shooting people and those kind of platforms?
Yeah, that's why I decided to make something that was a little bit more in depth. And this one, like You Eat Other Animals, Escape picked up this project. And
I worked on that.
Yeah, so, and you can see how many people all over the world actually. Let's see if I put it on project here. All right, so there we go. And we've got, this is the first one that they did, I think. And that has, like, you can see everybody who's working here. And this is a great place for you to put your portfolio, and you can see who's working on what. Usually, it's great if you have your showreel up here. What we're doing now is we're making sure that people have to not only put their IMDb or, their initial showreel, because if you're going to apply for paid projects, you need to have a complete profile. At the moment, we're partnering with a recruitment company, and they're bringing in a list of 50 high-end companies and clients to the table, and we're vetting people who apply for these projects. But a lot of these projects, when they're of, let's say, £1,500 and above, that's where we're really putting people forward for bigger jobs. Anything that's under that is considered indie, and that's also a great place to start. So, we've got this one, for example, which they were looking for a Houdini effects artist. And it started off as a collaboration project. And then they're like, oh, okay, we actually need somebody who's got a little bit more of a higher level. And so we're going to put £600 towards that and see if we can get and pay somebody, a mid-level artist or somebody who's got a decent knowledge of Houdini to get this project finished. That happens a lot. And I'm going to show you, so this is we're going to release a bunch of new features for recruitment as well. So as David was saying, and this is something that I wanted to feed in to the conversation, which is when you're starting off, you need to be everywhere. I mean, I would make a profile on Nerdio, on LinkedIn, absolutely wherever you can put yourself out online, do it. And if you can contact a recruiter and get on their books, do it as well. Because the more the more you expose your portfolio, the easier it's going. Well, the more chances you have of getting a job. I used to blanket email. I used to go through online on Google and sort of look at every production company in London and blanket email them with my links to my IMDb and showreel and everything, or even a link to my website, and say, hey, I'm looking for work. That's also a way to do it. Here, when on Nerdio, when you create a profile, you can set on your preferences if you want to be alerted. You get immediate alerts from anything that gets posted, whether it's a paid project or a collaboration. And so it's up to you to set it on your notifications and preferences. If you want to just hear about budgeted projects or non-budgeted projects, get invited, that sort of stuff. And that's it.
Well, yeah, brilliant. I mean, thank you for that sort of whistle-stop tour. I'm sure you've talked about that about 8,000 times. And, it's great. I mean, I would encourage everyone on this webinar today and anyone that's watching it recorded later to sign up and go for it. Get out there. We've got a few questions. We've got 5 minutes and we've got about 3 or 4 questions. Can we do like a quick whistle stop? A whistle stop tour. So nerdio.net, guys. Okay, nerdio.net. Okay, let's go. So Ross's one. Should we just answer Ross's one properly? Well, I guess the answer is yes, isn't it? Do you not get worried about the next job? Yes. Next question.
Yeah.
How do you allay those worries, I guess, is a better thing to think about.
I mean, it's an ongoing battle, isn't it? I mean, I think that is the thing. Your career is never really made as a freelancer, even if it is to the outside world, and even if you're never out of work, it never really feels that way. Especially if you've had a few years of utter failure, like I did. It never leaves you. So when the work comes in, you're always reticent to turn it down, and that is an issue with being a freelancer. Although in theory, you could have as many holidays as you want. What tends to happen is if you're busy, that you don't have any holidays because you're so haunted by the fear of not working that you work. I mean, I don't know who the quote is by, but there's a sort of famous saying that people that have full-time jobs live with the myth of security, but freelancers live with the myth of freedom.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I remember freelancing and knowing other freelancers now, and they never go on holiday because they're just too scared. And then you can guarantee that when you book one, that's what it does, isn't it?
Well, I have to say, I've had a couple of great years as a freelancer where I've gone like, you know what, I'm going to take the summer off. And I've done it. So there are great things about being a freelancer.
And you should do that, by the way. I think, that just sort of fumbling your way through that particular minefield of working or not working, even when you have the problem of being too busy, you should actually have a policy. What I learned quite late was that the only way that I could get holidays was if I really booked them well in advance. Because what I used to think was, what I'll do is I'll wait till I haven't got any work and then I'll just go on holiday. But then either something came along or I didn't want to go on holiday just in case something came along. And so I sort of didn't take enough breaks. Whereas if I said I'm going on holiday on the 1st of June for 2 weeks, in December, like if I plan that far ahead, then I can tell everybody for the next 6 months, I'm not available then. And then I found that was a much better way to manage things, to say, I am going to do this, I'm planning to do this, rather than just waiting for gaps. For me personally, that helped.
But what would you do if you'd booked your 2-week holiday for the 1st of June and December, and then on the end of April, someone got in touch with you and said, we've got a great job starting on the 1st of June and it's double what you normally get paid?
Double what you normally get paid, you're going to do it.
Well, I
If
mean,
it's not, you're not.
now I have a partner with a full-time job who doesn't understand freelancing at all. I would definitely still go on holiday because my life wouldn't be worth living.
Yeah, that's a whole other question, isn't it? About when you're single or together and what your other responsibilities are. Let's go to another question from Josh, because it's kind of like the thing that I thought, oh, we didn't talk about that, which was, do you charge hourly or for the entire project? So what do you guys think about that? How do you charge for these freelance projects?
Yeah, I charge daily, usually. I have a day rate. And and I guess for, depending, if it's like, if they're actually bringing the whole project to you, let's say this is later, usually it's later in life. If they're bringing me like, okay, they want me to do the visual effects for a whole short film or a whole music video, then you're looking at maybe a project, doing it for the whole project.
And so let me just say one thing there, Carla. So in that situation, then I guess you need to have some kind of producing skills. You need to be able to break down that project and think about how much work there actually is, rather than someone just at the start of your day in a facility going, there's your work for the day, there's your work for the day. You need to think about the whole length of that project and what could be the pitfalls. Someone might say, oh, it's just 10 shots, bit of roto. Before you know, you've got 30 shots and it's not just a bit of roto, you know? So that's
also something that you learn in the beginning, isn't it? Like you will make mistakes. Sometimes, you're going to think, oh, this is just a little bit of work. And then it snowballs into like 50 different shots. And because you're learning, you haven't budgeted for that. And that's going to be not great, but you're going to learn from it and you're going to never make that mistake again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real art form, learning. Like that is the thing that you cannot shortcut, is just the learning the millions of possible outcomes for things and how the nuances of things. But patterns start to emerge as you work, and you start to, people say things and they start to be red flags, and you go, cool, because I've heard that quite a few times before. But you can't learn that at university. You can't know that yet. So don't be too hard on yourselves if you make those mistakes. Just and don't stop it getting you involved as well. You do need to get out there, because if you do eventually want to start managing budgets, you're going to have to be in that position at some point, and the chances are you're not going to be offered a paid role or a formalized role to do that. First off, you're going to have to acquire those skills through some other route, which is doing things like collaborative projects, directing things, running things where you start to see a project from the other side, where suddenly, instead of thinking that it's really unreasonable that you're being asked to work late, that you're now the director and you think it's really unreasonable that people don't want to finish the job because they want to go home. Being able to see other people's perspectives, that all really does take time. So, and one thing that I just want to say about being paid hourly, one of the naughty things that agencies will sometimes do is they'll try and get you to do things like an hour or a half day rate or something. And they might, in other times when we're not all working remotely because of a pandemic, they might quite casually ask you to come up to London if you don't live in central London and do 3 hours of work, which costs you the same amount of money, because the travel's the same. And I think that's totally unreasonable. So that's something I stopped doing fairly early in my career. If you want me to work for you, it's a day or more. And I can't really do that much in a day, to be honest. Yeah. So I'm always suspicious when someone wants to book me for a day, really.
I was going to say to you guys, what are some real red flags to look out for, do you think?
That someone wanting you for half a day.
Yeah. I guess one of the things I wanted to talk about is like the reason why there's for many years, the reason why a lot of visual effects work came to the UK more than in LA sometimes was because we're cheaper, because we work on day rates. American contracts, they're paid for every hour that they work. And you can expect when you're starting off your career that you're going to be working way more than just 9 hours a day, especially in the film industry, which isn't right, but it happens. And so you want to at least make sure, this is why people are talking about unionizing. And if you're going to set yourself a day rate, try to negotiate contracts where you get paid overtime. After a day rate, after a certain amount of hours, you get paid for overtime and you get paid like maybe time and a half for weekends. In commercials, they're getting used to this sort of contract. So try it.
But how do I know, if I've employed you as a freelancer, how do I know that you're using those 8 or 9 hours that you're getting paid for to the best of your ability? And at what point does someone say, you're just taking too long on this and I'm not paying you overtime?
Well, back in the day, you'd be in the studio, so they would see you working. And a lot of the times, the reason why you're working so many hours is because production tells you to. So, you know, it's pretty easy to justify. That's not a problem. Nowadays, working from home, maybe there might be, you know, a bit more questions about where the time is spent, but it's usually quite easy to say, look, I mean, if they've given you 8 head replacements to do in a day, you're like, I need more than 9 hours to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess there's something there about just having communication skills again, negotiating comes with time, doesn't it? It's so difficult when you're young as well to kind of stand your ground, isn't it? Okay, guys, it's I was just going to say we're slightly over. I don't mind, but I know you guys have got other things to do. Do you want to? Should we kind of wrap it up a little bit, or are you okay for time? What do you want to do?
I'm kind of okay for
I'm all right.
Going a bit over.
All right, cool. Let's carry on for 5 minutes then, if that's all right. Will's looking at me now going, I want to have a sandwich now. We've got a meeting because there's a question here from Michael, and this kind of feeds on. It's like, how should you negotiate your rate with both new and existing clients? Let's take that as the last question. Think about money.
Think probably me and Caroline have, you know, because we work differently and in different arenas, it's probably a different answer. The short answer to my world is you don't negotiate your rate. You say what it is, and if they don't phone you back, then you probably charge too much, or you didn't want to be working with them in the first place. Ooh. There's not really a lot of toing and froing goes. I do get, I regularly get asked, you know, my extortionate day rate. They go, oh, it's a longer project. Would you knock it down a bit, you know, for a long booking or something? And even that I've stopped doing for a very simple reason. I'm busy all the time. So, yeah. You know, and you can end up just thinking, oh, I should do that out of the goodness of my heart, because that's reasonable, isn't it? You know, it's like 2 months work. But then I think, why? Because I'm going to make less money. I'm a business, and that's not a good use of my time. And I could, you know, I'm in that fortunate position. But it does highlight something, that you are a business, and think about it cold-headedly. The other way works as well. You know, when you're young and you don't have a lot of experience and a lot of anything really to stand you above the crowd, if you're charging just way above what the guy next to you is, the day rate is what the guy next to you and everyone else is charging. That's what it is. You're not going to be negotiated down. They're just not going to get back to you about it. The negotiating power is pretty limited in my industry. You have to feel your way, and there's a reason for that, and it suits the industries I work in. It keeps wages down because they're all talking to each other about what they're expecting, and none of us are, because we're not unionized, and that puts us in a weak position. So the non-communication about what everyone is being paid really services the industry side of things. It pushes our rates down doing that. And yeah. I know that there's some movements, Twitter, there's about like tell everyone your day rate hashtag every year, where people actually share what it is they're getting paid, just so freelancers can understand what other people are getting paid.
I mean, as a woman, I tend to be quite open about salaries and day rates. I think it's really important to talk about it just for that reason. And, you know, and this is what I was saying, we were talking about rates and what juniors and mid-level artists and senior artists can sort of expect in a certain way. But I think, yeah, it is important to talk about it. And, you know, I definitely, well, if you're a junior, you should be looking, you know, you shouldn't be charging like anything less than 120 a day. And I mean, nice. That's, I don't think you need to stand your ground there if they're trying to charge, trying to get you for less.
Do you think that applies across visual effects, games, and animation? And I guess it's probably, you know,
my experience is in visual effects and in film and TV, so I can't speak for games.
Yeah, but I guess it's you know, it's about finding out what that sweet spot is, isn't it? And just putting yourself nicely in the middle of it, to give yourself the chance of getting that call back and not being wildly over optimistic and not selling yourself short. So Okay, cool, Michael. Yeah, 120 a day. Wasn't sure. I think that sounds pretty good, Michael. I would, you just had it from Caroline as well, and Michael's a 2D artist, by the way. So that's good. A bit of, yeah. There you go.
I mean, when I
how many
started a
hours?
long time ago, I realized that I was on 90 a day at Framestore, and then when I did the jump to junior, like I was like, oh, I don't know, somebody Invisible gave me, I was like, oh, I'll charge 110, and they felt so sorry for me when I proposed 110. They're like, we'll give you 135, and I was like, oh my god.
Oh, that's cool.
That's actually a good point you make there, because it can work the other way. If you're charging too little and you're really good, you're not helping yourself twice, because not only are you not going to get paid as much, you're sort of suggesting you're worse than you are. There's, like, if I'm hiring people, in my industry, like if I see somebody that's £250 a day, in my industry, that's super junior. That's like graduate. So that's what I think that they are. And if you're not that, why are you charging 250 a day? Because I don't want you to be charging that as well. So there's the pay levels sort of work from both ends. If you're an amazing kind of finished article, and I'm hiring you, I get a bit weird if you're only charging me a low rate, because I think, well, that's not right. Like, why are they charging that? You will be expected to charge the rate of your seniority as you go up. So don't be shy. And if you're a freelancer, you can charge what you want. You might not ever work, but it's sort of telling you what your rate is. So if you want to go in really high and then knock it down until you start working, that's a pretty good sort of price discovery technique.
And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about as well, because, if you're going to work for a big company, I would say put your day rate up a little bit more up than what you expect, because they're going to try to negotiate with you. I mean, that happens with me still today. And, and it's like, if you're a senior artist, especially if you're a senior nuke artist and you're at the top level, just senior nuke compositing, I mean, the max you can charge is between 350 to 400 a day. And then obviously, then it goes into lead and supervision. And that's a whole different bracket of things. But if you're, trying to go into, for example, commercials at MPC, and if it's the first time that you're going back in there to a bigger company, they are going to go, yeah, we don't know you. Can we just, give you 275? And I'm like, no, you need to stand your ground there, especially if you're more senior. But if you are not more senior, you might take it just to have that under your belt. So it's all about negotiating in that sense.
That's really cool. And I think, so essentially you've got to know the marketplace. If you're going into the freelance world, you've got to get to know the marketplace a little bit and talk to other people. Caroline's given you a good number there, and I would have said something similar. I think that's probably the same across games and animation as well, but do some research. And I don't know, have you guys, I probably should know this myself, but where could we go? I think Back2 has rates, doesn't it? Doesn't Back2 have some? Back2 has some like average day rates and things, like even Screen Skills has probably got something about that, and UK Screen Alliance, and there's other forums out there. Find out what you're worth. That's one thing that I always say to new students. What are you actually worth? Not in your own mind, but to a commercial company. So. Right, guys, listen, I'm going to wrap it up and say thank you very much.